We phrase it as a logical equation. Number one, women give birth to babies. Agreed?
Yeah.
You agree, right? Two, men envy women for giving birth to babies. Women get away with everything because they give birth to babies. So without women, we're nothing because we need babies, right? So men envy women for giving birth to babies. Number three, because men envy women for giving birth to babies, then men create technology. Men give birth to technology. Four, because technology develops over time, whereas babies are equally stupid with every generation, it follows from that. Five, there will come a day when the technology kills the baby.
Wow.
Meaning a technological intelligence will eventually take over the world and human beings will become redundant.
Welcome back to Mtambo's podcast. My name is Jakub Mtambo, and the following is a conversation with Alexander Bard, a Swedish philosopher and futurologist. Joining with me is also Jakub Simek, who is a co-founder of Wezesha DAO and an author of Wisdom Enterprising. In today's episode, we'll be talking with Alexander Bard on various philosophical topics, among them Digital Monasteries, Ecotopia and Cosmopolis, and lastly, Syntheism and synthetic intelligence. Alexander, it's great honor and pleasure to have you back on Mtambo's podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, Alexander, let's kickstart today's podcast with Digital Monastery. Some people see digital monasteries as a valuable way to carve out space for personal growth and reflection in an increasingly chaotic world. And these online communities provide a way for people to connect with like-minded individuals who share similar interests, values, and goals. They can also be a source of inspiration and motivation, as well as a place to seek advice, guidance, and support. But on the other side, some critics of digital monasteries argue that these online spaces are simply an illusion of connection and community, and that they foster loneliness, isolation, and disconnection from the real world. And spending too much time online can be detrimental to mental health, and that the constant need for stimulation and validation can impede personal growth and self-discovery. Well, what's your take on these two perspectives?
Well, the term digital monastery, since my colleague John Sendicus and I started using it first, I guess we kind of own it. And the etymology, the origin of the term digital monastery is actually a bit misunderstood here. The point is not to have like online communities where you spend all your time online. The point is rather that we've lost touch with spiritual development, in the sense that spiritual development is something you do, you isolate yourself, you go to somewhere to develop yourself spiritually. And in this sense, historically speaking, monasteries were originally developed along the trade routes. The oldest monasteries we know of were called kastags, and they started in Persia and Central Asia about 4,000 years ago. They later became monasteries within the feudalist religions. So you had monasteries, for example, the Buddhism, Taoism in the East, and certainly with Christianity in the West. But the original kastags were Zoroastrian and came from Persia. And the point was that if you look at the trade routes, when you were trading and you were going to, say, a new oasis town, a trading post, you would have hospice of some kind. You would have somewhere you had to stay, that'd be like something like Airbnb or a hotel today. You would then have a restaurant you could go to. You would certainly have a bathhouse, a gym. The sorkhanas are old gyms, the gyms that existed for over 3,000 years along trading posts in Central Asia. You would then, the next to them, have, besides the bathhouse, especially in Africa, you would have bathhouses because you would go through the Sahara, you'd be very dusty, right? Yeah. You would also have whorehouses. These days they're called nightclubs, but they serve exactly the same purposes. But you would then also have a bazaar where you did all the trading. But finally, after you're done your trading at the bazaar, you would go to see a kastag. You would go to isolate yourself somewhere for spiritual guidance, get over the bad trade deals and, get a constructive mindset about your life before you went on to the next town to go on trading again. And these kastags became so popular that you had to educate people to run these kastags. And they're, of course, the original monks and nuns. So you would put these custodians in isolation away from the trading post, and preferably somewhere high up, in the heavens or close to the heavens, where you'd expect to find gods or spirits. And therefore, mountainous areas like Tibet, Ethiopia, Peru, Iran, eventually these places were full of these kind of monasteries eventually, where you would isolate yourself in the mountains. So when we talk about digital monasteries, we should think about this is a return to the idea you go somewhere to isolate yourself, to develop yourself spiritually. And we use the term digital monastery because you're obviously going to use both digital and physical space to do
Okay,
it this time
maybe
around.
just to cut you short, is
So
this the same as
you could have like a physical monastery with Wi-Fi would be something I would describe as a digital monastery.
You called it Wi-Fi castles, right? At some
Wi-Fi
point.
castles, yeah, we use the term Wi-Fi castles too. Yes.
So the traditional way, you can say it's like mostly like the one Buddhism on Buddhism or something like that.
Yeah, for example, Buddhist monasteries. So I've lived a large part of my life in Buddhist monasteries. I currently live in an urban monastery, which is certainly very digital, in central Stockholm, together with two other men. Three of us live together in this community here. We're also now building a place outside of Stockholm in the countryside, where we can have like a farm or something like that and run a monastery. So we're talking about digital monasteries, like very physical places. So, but they have the Wi-Fi. They're online connected, and because they're online connected, an entire community of monasteries can now have a network of monasteries, and that's why we use the term digital monastery.
And there was also this point of like a rehab, or there was this like term like decelerators, and I know that you also talked like about maybe investing in some kind of like this village kind of like rural decelerators or kind of rehabs where you can just like recharge and like get your life in order, kind of.
Yeah, I'm interested actually in psychedelic retreats, and I'm investing in that here in Europe at the moment. And it turns out the original psychedelic retreats were also in Central Asia some 4,000 years ago. They were probably also developed in parallel in Peru and Mexico. And I think I'm going to do some of this work. There's a couple of guys out there. One is Shohin Etnam, who's an Iranian guy living in Canada, and another guy, Zachary Adama, who's a brilliant young American. And we're going to develop a podcast together coming later this year. We're going to talk about Peru, Mexico, and Iran as the three original psychedelic superpowers. Because if you look at psychedelics and the history of psychedelics, it's funny, but it's actually mountainous areas. They're the golden areas of the world. And Peru, Mexico, and Iran, by far, are the three places on the planet that have the most number of psychoactive substances you could have used, and therefore these practices originally were developed there. And I think there's a renaissance coming. So for example, take psychedelics, which is very complicated. In most cases, in most countries, it's even illegal. So the way to do that in the future would be to set up a digital monastery. It's a physical place. It has Wi-Fi. It is connected to the online world constantly. You have all the information in the world you want to have access to. You can learn and study deeply. And this is the point with the monastery, is to go there to do deep studies and do spiritual work. Now, once you start connecting them, you could also open up psychedelic retreats, for example, or other forms of spiritual treatments. And you could then have them next to the monastery, which is a very, very logical evolution of monasteries, that next to the monastery, which is for your own deep study, once you've studied and you become a monk, for example, you could then take on other people to do spiritual and healing work with them. And I think these things are all going to get connected with one another. And the online world, digital, makes it a lot easier than in the past to do any of these things. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. Say you live in Nairobi or Bratislava or Stockholm. So you live in a city. I would expect you to go downtown to a small corner shop and have your first visit to see if you need some treatment or some spiritual development. It could be in connection with a yoga studio or a meditation center. And you would then go there after work. Rather than go out and get drunk after work, you'll probably go somewhere for some spiritual development. Mm-hmm. Then they would serve you packages and say that we also have this monastery in the countryside in Slovakia or Kenya or Sweden. And you can go there and, get better treatment for like a longer period. So you could isolate yourself for, say, 2 to 3 months and get a full spiritual healing treatment, or train yoga or meditation, or say a Vipassana retreat, something like that. You would go there and learn things. And as you learned, you could also go back to work there and take your digital nomadism with you, and basically get your laptop going on the Wi-Fi and start working. So you could stay much longer in the retreat. It wouldn't be like a radical break from your career to go somewhere for 3 months, but rather you could go somewhere for 3 months, say work half time, and also go through a proper spiritual development program at the same time. I think these things are just going to explode over the next 10 to 20 years. They make perfect sense. We have all the traditions are there already. We just need to reconnect to these traditions and understand that digital makes it easier than ever to do all these things.
And because they're remote locations, but also there is this remote work plus maybe Starlink, you might work just half time, and you might actually save the same amount as if you are staying in the expensive city, and plus you get this kind of spiritual and physical
exactly
workout.
You're getting it completely right. So you would have a small corner shop because space is expensive in a city, and people could go there, say after work for an hour or something, to get some kind of treatment, like a yoga studio, perfect for having a city. But then what people want to do, like they need more than that. Well, we have a large mansion in the countryside where space is a lot cheaper. Why don't you go there for a while and fix your life and get your life in order and go back to work at the same time? I sort of call this an we fix you industry. So you can imagine like therapy, yoga, the gym, practices of different kinds, spiritual practices, meditation, learning these things properly, taking care of yourself, maybe also healing, and also having, say, psychedelic experiences in a very controlled environment with professionals. You should put all these places into these retreat centers in the countryside, and the people who live there permanently would then consider that a monastery, and the people who come there occasionally to visit for a retreat would consider it to be a retreat center. They would be the same places. All of these traditions have existed already, for example, in Catholicism and Buddhism, and I think there's a great renaissance coming for these kind of spiritual retreat centers and monasteries.
Can I just follow up with your idea of tribal mapping, that this would be done in the countryside or in the small corner office in the city? Or would it be done? It's like kind of useful idea. Maybe if you can elaborate. I know it's maybe for an additional podcast, but like
yeah, it's very complex. It's even called archetypography. So now you know the word. Tribal mapping is the map that we have inside our own minds, where women tend to kind of be densely concentrated in their mindset with other women. Of course, we call that matriarchy. We also call it the inner circuit in a society. And men tend to be more spread out over larger areas surrounding the inner circuit, which is why it's called the outer circuit. This model also explains, for example, androgynous people and why they're required in society, why they're very useful and why they should be there. And I think, for example, if you do, say you work in the rights movement for LGBT rights, I think this model makes perfect sense because it gives you a role that isn't man or woman, but actually somewhere in between. And it makes sense because you need the go-betweens between the inner and the outer circuits. So the tribal map is a map of the tribe, which is basically the form we've developed evolutionarily as human beings. It makes perfect sense. But there's also a small minority of people called shamanoid personalities, and they live outside the entire scheme. So they live outside the entire tribal map, in between tribes. And that's why you find spiritual people in very remote places. What spiritual people often do is that they're like, no, I don't want to be inside society. I'm too introverted. I don't want to be in a big city full of people. I want to go out in the forest or out in the wilderness somewhere. And of course, then they open small monasteries and things where they can do exactly what they want to do. And what then happens is that they become go-betweens between communities, because these places, these monasteries, often built, say, between two cities. Could be two cities in Kenya, for example. In between the cities is where you most likely find a monastery or a kastag. And then it makes sense for people when people in general need to leave the city to go and fix their lives and go, say, into therapy or counseling or something, they will go to that very place to see those shamanoid people who, it turns out, have a mindset and personality type that is all about being go-betweens between different types of people and between cultures. And of course, again, then it makes perfect sense. These shamanoid centers, when we were still nomadic, some 10,000 years ago, became ritual places. A perfect example, for example, is Göbekli Tepe in southern Turkey today, which is like a huge place being excavated at the moment. It was a ritual place for seasonal rituals for people who came from many different tribes and met at the specific place for the rituals. So again, this is so mapped with us as human beings. And when I start thinking about it, it makes perfect sense to build monasteries and retreat centers in the countryside. And for the shamanoid personalities among us, I'm one of them, we just love to go to these places, isolate ourselves, learn things, study deeply, go into meditation, all those things, which then turns out also to be very healthy and good for people occasionally to go through in general. And that's exactly what you do. You run retreat centers next to monasteries.
And also, like you mentioned, like this very useful idea of like this like minor subject and major subject, like two different archetypes. You know, like the people can like discover. Let's say, you know, there is this archetype of a very warrior or like engineer, and let's say a priest or there, you know, some others, and like
or a mother or a father. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We are archetypes. Human beings are archetypes. Also, the surroundings around us are archetypes. Having a home is an archetype, right? So our whole world as human beings is basically a set of archetypes to orientate ourselves through to make sense of things. And what we talk about in archetypology, not archetypography, that's trying to map, but archetypology is now using today, of course, computers and data science to figure out what kinds of different people we are. And we've discovered that lots of different types of men and lots of different types of women. There are also a few go-betweens, androgynous people. There are also people who are shamanoid, who are much more extensive in their mindset and compared to other people because they're supposed to be go-betweens between communities. Once we discover that there's so many different archetypes among human beings, or personality types, if you want to call it that, then it makes perfect sense for people to try to figure out what kind of archetype I am. And we say that I'm in search of myself. I mean that I'm still in search of how I can contribute to the tribe. That's what it means. And I've discovered, for example, if you go to college in America, you usually study a major and then a minor. That makes perfect sense. The major is what you really need to focus on to have a career. And a minor is something you probably study because you enjoy it, and it's just good to study more things than what you have to study to become a certain profession because you go to college, right? The same thing goes with what we call primary and secondary archetype. So in spiritual work, you try to find out what is your primary archetype, which is that which you do with ease, which is the easiest thing in the world for you to do. But other people think it's absolutely amazing and they applaud you when you do it. So that you just go, well, that's nothing. And everybody else goes, wow, when you do that, you're so damn awesome when you do that, right? How do you do that? It's just like, well, it's just the most natural thing in the world for me to do. That's your primary archetype. Whereas the secondary archetype is something you could do, somebody in the room has to do it, or you've educated yourself to do it. So it's like you could step in and take that role if somebody has to take that role. It takes much more effort in the primary archetype, but you could do it as a secondary archetype. And I always recommend people to, if they're lucky, they might even consider the primary archetype to be a profession. If it isn't a profession, if that's impossible, then maybe your secondary archetype is a good place to put your bets when it comes to a career. And once you start working with people in this sense, it makes so much sense to them. You know, the problem with psychology is too general. Psychology tries to treat everybody basically the same way. The great thing we do in archetypology is instead you can actually look at yourself specifically at what kind of man or what kind of woman you are and get instant help to find that. And once you found your archetype and it makes sense to you, it also makes sense to you to go find mentors, people who are the same archetype as you are, who are older than you are, and who can therefore inspire you and guide you so you can do it right. And of course, when you look at religion, say, for example, saints or lesser gods, as we call them, role models that we worship and things like that, it's always, they're always archetypes in this sense. They're always like, okay, so you're a painter. Well, we have a god for painting here. He's the painter god. Why don't you go to the painter god temple and, worship the painter god so you can become a better painter? And this is why archetypology makes so much sense for people.
Mm-hmm. Just to illustrate it, so it could be like a creator or a writer or like a visual artist, or just like a multimedia creator plus let's say an investor or an engineer, like a secondary archetype, or vice versa.
It's often professional, but it could be a lover, for example. And I was a sex worker when I was younger. I'm quite radical with these ideas. I think sex workers are incredibly fascinating personalities. They're definitely shamanoid. But what interested me with sex work was the fact that the people who did it were so different from other people. I was interested in their psychology. They were doing things that other people would never do. I thought it'd be very hard, but for them, it was just the most natural thing in the world to do. And I discovered an archetype called the Tantric lover. Some men and some women are tantric lovers. And when I discovered these people, I'm a teacher of Tantra, I just basically tell them, that's definitely your primary archetype. You're so fucking good at it. It's scary. Okay. So whether you become a sex worker or not doesn't matter. You could be a tantric lover anyway. You could live a normal everyday life and then probably instead look at your secondary archetype as your profession. So again, being a father or a mother is also an archetype. Being a grandfather, grandmother archetype, it doesn't have to be profession. I would say that your primary archetype is what's most dear to you, that you really want to do, what you feel you contribute. This is how you become contributive in relationship to other people. That's your primary archetype. And then when you look at the secondary archetype, it's great to complement the primary one with the secondary one, because you often find your profession in the secondary archetype.
But these also these modern professions, or like these kind of hobbies professions, like creator or engineer, they map to these like ancient kind of like archetypes, like priest, right, or warrior, like someone who is
exactly
who is more into logos or pathos. So like engineer is into logos, like that type of narratology.
I basically work with male archetypes, not so much with female ones, because we have women who work on the female archetypology. We're probably better at it. But if the warrior and the hunter are two fundamental archetypes among men, we have to kill and we have to eat. But there's an enormous difference between killing an animal and killing another human being. And this difference between warrior and hunter is therefore absolutely essential among men. And of course, in a contemporary society, the warrior archetype is an engineer, and the hunter archetype is a businessman. So these archetypes return in different forms depending on the paradigm. If we settle, if we're no longer nomadic, if we even become urbanized and moving to big cities like the three of us have done, then these archetypes change. But the basic archetype behind the engineer is the warrior, and the basic archetype behind the businessman is the hunter. And when you study these people in laboratories, for example, you discover that engineers have a very warrior-like mentality about how they go about things. And you discover that businessmen have a very hunter-like mentality about how they go about things. And that is great to know when you work with the archetypes. For example, I'm teaching at a business and management school. So I am basically a priest of businessmen, or a priest of hunters, in that case, a hunter priest, which is my archetype as a teacher at that school. And priest is, of course, originally shaman. So once we've settled and we're no longer nomadic, the shamanic archetype becomes the priestly archetype. So that's another example of that. Or say the chieftain becomes the king. So the archetypes return constantly in new shapes and forms depending on the paradigm.
Sorry, can I ask the difference between hunter and warrior? Or like why does it map to businessman versus engineer? Because it's really interesting.
I can give you there are a few tricks you learn very quickly when you do archetypology, as you do with any data science. Hunters go about their activity every day. you're a hunter, say, I've been hunting in Cameroon in Africa. I've been hunting in the Amazonas. I've lived with hunters. I've lived with hunters in New Guinea. And constantly, difference between a hunter and warrior is essential. The different personality types, the different guys, right? The hunters go about their activity every day. The deal makers. So they need competition to really be at the top of their game. That's why capitalism is really grateful for hunters. They make deals, they do bargains, and when you come home from work, you put the fucking deer on the table and it's about to eat. Like you're gonna have a great meal because they've done the work. Warriors accumulate energy for long periods of time, build forts, they build structures. They rarely kill, but when they do, they really kill because they kill other human beings. And they have to kill something that's very smart, another human being who's an enemy from an enemy tribe. That's a very, very different mindset. And the funny thing with engineers is that they hate the kind of competition where businessmen excel. Rather, engineers have a mindset where they like to know what they're going to do, and they take pride in doing it and doing it properly. So, for example, the warrior mindset, the engineer, is better for bureaucracy. There'd be more confusion, we would say. Whereas a trader, businessman, hunter mentality is better for, say, capitalist markets. And in China, for example, this even developed into two different religions. The split in religions in China is on this axis. Taoism was eventually developed for businessmen and hunters. Confucianism was eventually developed for engineers and warriors. And Chinese society is constructed on these two different religions because they fit so perfectly well into the archetypology. Other cultures are divided on other splits, but the Chinese culture is divided on this specific axis between. Ironically, they talk about yin and yang all the time, but actually, it's all on the yang side. It is split on the yang side. Actually, we're talking about here, which Chinese society, of course, is built on. So women go along on the right, but actually, society is often constructed in a phallic way. It's about the splits and the different archetypes among men that eventually create, the wealth and the welfare of a society.
And maybe like a leader and a politician can also follow under that archetype, like the way you say hunt and warrior.
Yeah. So we developed politics. We developed politics because we probably used to kill kings when the kings weren't popular any longer, and it didn't serve the kings very well. So we developed politics where you can, for example, vote for a politician every 4 years. So instead of killing a politician, maybe we should, but we don't. We actually fire them and throw them out, and replace them with somebody else after an election. So politics is a way of doing monarchy in a smarter way, where you have a higher turnaround of the monarchs without having to kill them all the time. That's what politics is. So politics, again, is a contemporary archetype which is built on another archetype, which is permanent settlement, which is ruled by royalty and a monarchy. And that monarchy complements the priesthood. If the priesthood is based on the smartest minds in the community, then the monarchy is based on the strongest bodies in the community, because it's based on warfare. You go to war, you have territorial expansion, and then you build a kingdom after you won the war, for example. And so that goes back to chiefs and chieftains in nomadic tribes that are on the move. And it turns out it's exactly the same personality type, the same archetype, who is a good chief, who becomes a good king, and who then becomes a smart politician in the kind of society we live in today. So the same archetypes return. They just return during they change shape because of a new paradigm. Living in a city, living in the countryside, being constantly on the move, being nomadic, means these archetypes only change paradigmatically, but they're the same archetypes that return.
And so in the new paradigm of attentionalism, then these politicians are replaced by I would say like YouTubers, but I probably am wrong,
No. They're replaced entirely. We're moving towards something called sensocracy. So you will probably very soon vote for an AI and prefer an AI over a single human being that you vote for. So I'd say in that sense, at least for the foreseeable future, we're going to vote for people that are going to administer what used to be called politics but increasingly using machines and AI to solve the problems of politics. And basically the rules and the regulations and the standards that are being set for an advanced technological construction, essentially what politics is going to deal with in the future. And so in that sense, we're going to leave politics entirely as you deal with these old institutions and move into what we call a sensocracy instead. The Chinese have their version of sensocracy already. It's basically tyranny. We put Xi Jinping at the top and the Communist Party rules everything. What we're presenting our philosophy is rather a smarter system where you split power before you install a political system through AI. But it's still sensocracy with cameras and surveillance machines and God knows what else everywhere, because we're going to have that, undeniably.
Okay. So it could be also something like social credit, but like more horizontal, like more, let's say, voluntary and based on some kind of community, I don't know, resume or something like that.
But I don't know about social credit. It's certainly going to be problematic for you if you do something, because we're not going to have passports much longer. We can basically skip the passports already today because your eye is all that's required to figure out who you are when you walk into a building. So in that sense, it's unavoidable. I mean, the authorities of large countries like China or America or, say, the European Union, I'm sure the authorities already have every damn eye on the planet already registered. So in that sense, we're moving towards that sort of what we talk about in our philosophies. Again, we're going very advanced discussion today. We talk about membranes. So can you walk in or out or a building? Are you allowed in or are you banned from entering? For example, national borders are examples of such membranes that are becoming increasingly intelligent.
We discussed it last time, like the membranings of the nightclub and of the bazaar. So and something like, and the competition between let's say nightclubs and bazaars is essential. And that there is a older woman in the olden days, there was like acting as a bouncer or like a smart regulator, like regulating who can come actually in, you know. So it's like a semi-permeable membrane, meaning like exit is essential.
I believe the vast majority of people, if they can afford to live in gated communities, because a gated community has a gate. So not anybody can get in, and that's exactly the point. You know, you want to live secure. You know, you want to be safe. You want your children to be safe. So gated communities are going to run. That's the future, because they'd be so affordable to set up. And then you can decide. You could also have a gated community system. We don't allow boring people in here, or we don't allow rich people. They can't get in. We only want poor people or fun people, whatever. You know, we'll come up with so many different kinds of membranes that will in turn create so many different kinds of communities. That's unbelievable. But what will then return constantly is the tribal map. What will return is the archetypology, because we are the same people that we were 5,000 or 10,000 years ago. We are universally the same people. Three of us live in Kenya, Slovakia, and Sweden. People are the same. We all come out of the same origin some 40,000 years ago. We haven't changed that much since then. So people are incredibly similar anywhere you go in the world. And the data proves it. You know, the people are incredibly similar anywhere you go in the world. Data will kill all racism, definitely kill it. Doesn't make any sense at all. And once you discover that people are so similar, then with the same technologies available everywhere, they will also have very similar life patterns. And that's what we're discussing, what kind of life people live in the future. We're fascinated. We kind of do it. It's a futurology here, meaning it's like you do archaeology before it's happened, right? You try to figure out what the future will be like for people with the new technologies.
And can you have like a competition, you know, like you discussed before, like the competition between bazaars or nightclubs and the exit, the right of like to exit these, let's say, membranes or jurisdictions is essential. Like we discussed Singapore and Dubai, and so can you have like a competition between sensocracies, but let's say even like on the same geography, like let's say Uber versus Lyft versus Bolt, you know,
brilliant
something
point.
like
That's exactly what we're trying to do. So what we're doing now in response to the Chinese concept of sensocracy is that we're developing a much more open model. And if nothing else, you can vote with your feet. The reason why Dubai and Singapore are successful, although both places are dictatorships, Dubai and Singapore are literally dictatorships. They're still successful because people who move there and make careers there and become incredibly wealthy. These are two of the most wealthiest places on the planet right now. They just feel, when we've interviewed them, they just feel like, well, I can leave. I can just get out of here. I've got the biggest airport in the world around the corner. I can just go there and leave. And that's increasingly what these sort of city-states are going to look like. And these city-states, I believe, are a much better model for the future than these old empires like China, Russia, and America that I think eventually will fall apart. We'll have enormous problems adjusting to digital world because we have empire already. The empire is the globe itself. Technology doesn't know any borders. Data travels freely anywhere in the world. And that's our concept of the global empire. It's already happened. It is internet. The internet protocol is universal law today. So that's digital, right? So digital is gone. Imperial, technological covers the whole world. But human beings are isolated in smaller and smaller communities. And since the smaller communities can be attached to the global empire, have all the benefits of being imperial, while benefiting even more from also being small, close-knit communities where people feel aligned with one another, you will have increasingly city-states that will be very successful, like Dubai and Singapore. And in the future, maybe Singapore then becomes more successful than the entire communist China is. I just came from Taiwan. I mean, I find Taiwan incredibly fascinating. And the comparative studies we do now on Taiwan is that we compare with Israel. Taiwan and Israel are perfect examples of tight-knit communities who have migrated there from a larger population and therefore set up their own dream, what they want to do with what is essentially a small nation or a city-state or something in between. And I think nationalism in this sense will return in a big way because we'll have some kind of what I call liberal nationalism, meaning that if the borders of Kenya work well, or if the borders of Slovakia work well, that's a membrane. And within that membrane, you can then create specific gated communities and subcultures that can have a network, a relationship with one another within a very safe and secure border, like Kenya's or Slovakia's national border.
Mm-hmm. And maybe lastly about the gated communities or like these kind of clubs, like not the private clubs or let's say rural decelerators. Like, would you run them as franchisees with membership, or like how would you do?
Oh, it's up for innovation. I'm not going to dictate that. There's a market for that. So the thing is today, we're working with communities. There's a community called Prospera in Roatan in Honduras that are almost like they're trying to create a Hong Kong in Central America, right? With Bitcoin, based on Bitcoin. So we're studying and working with them at the moment. I'm intensely interested in how that develops.
Yeah, there
are also places like Dubai and Singapore that work already. If you want to study digital nomadism, just go to Dubai because the vast majority of people live in Dubai are digital nomads. So we can study both at the same time.
Yeah, in Prospera, there are like a lot of Slovaks and Czechs, actually.
Yes, I know. Yes, my friend do sound very Slovak, just like you, Jakub. So you Slovaks have a sensibility for this, apparently. So a lot of digital monastery thinking going on in Slovakia, apparently. How is it in Kenya? How are you doing there?
I think we are catching up. I'm not sure that we are at that level of Slovak yet. Yeah, but maybe
you were working on one such a thing, actually, like the Diaspora University city or something, actually around Voi. So
yes, yeah. Previously, I was working on that. Yeah, and I see just communities. Kenyans who are at diaspora and they're coming together, like it's like giving back to the community, but also setting up like city also in a rural area whereby they can. Create job opportunities for the people around that area, but also like a place where they can come back when they are old, when they get old, or when they retire. So they can come to a place where they can relax and enjoy the environment. Yeah.
It's excellent. I mean, one of my favorite places in Africa is Yeovil, which is a suburb in Johannesburg. And I also recommend people who want to study Africa to go to Yeovil because Yeovil has a Kenyan community, Somali community, Nigerian community. It has all kinds of people who come from all over Africa and moved to South Africa, and they've all gone to Yeovil because it's like a little Africa in one place. Mm-hmm. It's a dream for an anthropologist because you can sit down and make comparative studies of different African cultures in one and the same place. And I think creating more Yeovils is definitely the future. I think you will have little Nairobis because you have so many Kenyans. You breed like mad in Kenya too. You have babies. We've forgotten how to have babies in Europe, but thank God the Africans are breeding. Half the children of the world born today are African. And Kenyans will have large exile communities around the world. You'll have many little Nairobis in other major cities around the world. And it makes sense now to build them. We can learn, for example, from the Chinatowns that were built in the 20th century. They were highly successful, make perfect sense. And when China really entered the world economy in the 1970s, every damn Chinatown, anywhere you find today, is incredibly wealthy because it had as a center trading post for China's inclusion in the world economy. And the same thing is now happening with Indian communities around the world. There are 5 million Indians living in North America. They have intensely successful careers. Silicon Valley is full of Indian Americans right now. And this makes perfect sense. And I say every time, I work with the Baltic states. There were small countries who joined the world economy in the 1990s. Had no idea what they were going to do, and they were scared that so many young people left those countries. But I said, no, every Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian leaving the country now, they're just leaving with Ryanair or EasyJet anyway. They can fly back next week. They're not migrating to North America, never to be seen again. They go back and forth. They're migrating again. And because they're migrating and because digital is available and they have connections with their families and talk to their mothers, on Zoom every 2 days or so, they will go back eventually. And they did. Now Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia have an influx of people, both immigrants coming from other parts of the world and Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians moving home. I think it's perfect for Canada to build these places like, okay, so you Kenyan, you go out in the world and make a career. You will still have a connection with your family in Kenya. You'll probably even send them money, remittances. And eventually, when you get older and you're successful, you take your money with you, go back to Kenya and live a wonderful life as a senior citizen of Kenya. Makes perfect sense.
It's true. Maybe as we wind up this topic on digital monasteries, maybe maybe we can try to break it down in stages. Before it was Buddhism, and then now we're moving into that isn't traditional, but now we are into digital monasteries. Do you foresee virtual digital monasteries just because of this, for example, pandemics and all this emergency coming in the future, like where people like digital monasteries, like we move to a corner, for example, where there's Wi-Fi connected and people meet physical. But do you foresee in future where we'll have virtual, monasteries?
I don't think it makes sense because human beings have bodies and we're very embodied. What was great during the pandemic was that we figured out, okay, Zoom works, Google Meets works, Microsoft Teams works. So we figured out all these different technologies we can do. For example, this podcast recording sitting in 3 different countries. We discovered what was great with digital. We also discovered its limitations. We also discovered that you have to have physical meetings with people because we are embodied creatures. And so the limitations to what you can do with digital. I don't think a monastery that takes itself seriously can only be online, because it can't cover your spirituality completely by just being online all the time. But a lot of the things you do in the monastery, specifically the network between monasteries, it's great to have the online world and have access to it. But we will travel more than ever. I think already next year, by 2024, we'll travel even more than we did before the pandemic. That's how quickly people are going back up in the air, flying around the world and traveling. And we love traveling. Human beings are nomadic. We're not settled at all. Heidegger is so dead wrong. Heidegger talks about your blood and your earth and, your Heimat on the planet. I'm just like, no way. My family were vagabonds. I was born in Africa, came to Sweden when I was 2 years old the first time. I moved around the world all my life. I love traveling. No, I think it's much more natural for human beings to travel if they can afford to. And when we travel, we learn and we have experiences and we get better at being human. Spirituality starts with traveling.
Yeah, you were born in South Africa, right?
Yes. Exactly.
Like Elon Musk.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
Last time we talked about Elon Musk, so we forgot to tell your story that you were actually you're also from South Africa.
So Alexander Bad is still an African.
Yeah,
absolutely. We're all Africans originally anyway, but yes, I have African roots. I'm very proud of it. I love Africa, as you know. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah. There are two Africans and one Slovak, but like I also fell in love with Kenya when I first came there in 2010. So visited like 20 times, but like, yeah, didn't stay for long, 3 months, the longest. So yeah.
Yeah, I always get this sort of vigor, this sense of energy when I go to India. India is a place where everybody talks about the future now, and India is growing rapidly and all that. It feels very youthful. But next after India, once India has peaked, and Indians also stop having babies, and get a bit too affluent, the middle class, I certainly see Africa taking over. I think 100 years from now, Africa will dominate the world, at least culturally, in so many different ways. And Africans will have moved to all these other places. I definitely think we're going to have a large African migration to Europe. And I'm just preparing, working with people in Europe, with politicians everywhere, say that we need a lot of Africans to come to Europe to work here. And they're hard workers, they have their own careers. And they, of course, now build their own communities over here as well, which makes sense.
Yeah, but you can also like invite much more like students, like for example, Slovakia is like really behind, like I don't know, like even if you compare it to Hungary, like they have like almost 30 times more like foreign students actually from countries like Nigeria, Kenya. I mean, I have a Kenyan friend who studied in Budapest, so it's like yeah, I mean it's amazing. It's like how far behind Slovakia is actually, even compared to Hungary. It's like 30 times more. They have 30 times more foreign scholarships. They provide foreign scholarships, like not 3 times or 30% more, but like almost 30 times more. Yeah. So
yeah, Slovakia is still a country looking for its identity, isn't it?
I don't know. It's very interesting because we have such a like liberal image, but like we have, for example, but we are the strictest law about like religious freedom. I mean, like setting up a new religion or even like registering Islam in Slovakia is like you need like 50,000 signatures. So for example, Islam is not registered, and we don't have an official mosque in Slovakia, which is like strange. But we have super liberal image. So imagine that. Like imagine poor Hungary. They have mosques. They have registered partnerships for same-sex couples. They have 30 times more foreign scholarships for foreign students, like from all around the world, and but Slovakia is the liberal darling here. So I don't know. It's just like I think it's all about the image, just.
Well, I think it's about, when it concerns your countries, that Prague and Budapest are old cosmopolitan centers. I think we're going to go into cosmopolitanism later. And they have these long traditions of being cosmopolitan centers. Prague is one of the oldest major cities of Europe, and Budapest as well. So it's the cosmopolitan cultures of Budapest and Prague that have made those countries more cosmopolitan today. The problem with Slovakia is that Slovakia only became independent recently, and Bratislava is not at all as cosmopolitan as Budapest is. I think that explains the difference.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, we had like.
And you'd probably see the same thing in East Africa, would you?
Yeah.
Duke, you'd see the same thing there. But I'm working in Rwanda, and Rwanda is just getting used to the idea that it's becoming like the Switzerland of East Africa, and everything, trains around on time or whatever. But it's something similar to that. But the people I work with in Rwanda, although they work hard, they all come from Nairobi, and they go back to Nairobi to party and go to nightclubs and live out their lives, because to them, Nairobi is a cosmopolitan place. And Kigali, Rwanda, is a very sort of remote, more marginal place to live.
Yeah, it's true. Nairobi is most cosmopolitan, like than any country in East Africa. Yeah, even like if anybody gets sick, gets to Nairobi for medication.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, well, I think the future of digital monastery is an exciting topic, and as technology continues to advance, I believe we'll still see more and more of this growing. The potential for digital monastery to drive innovation and creativity is huge, and I think we are only scratching the surface of what is possible. But let's shift our gears a little bit and talk about Ecotopia. I think we had already mentioned it, and Cosmopolis. So while Ecotopia focuses on the relationship between humans and environment, if I get it right, Cosmopolis refers to a global city or a city that is connected to the world in a cosmopolis, people move from different culture and backgrounds to come together to live and work, creating a melting point of culture and ideas. It's a place where diversities and globalization are celebrated, and where the boundaries between nations and culture are blurred. Well, how do you see about these two concepts coexisting and even complement each other in a way, in some ways, and how do we strike a balance between the two in order to create a sustainable and inclusive future?
Well, I think it's more about the completion of revolutions that already happened in history. So once we started farming and we started taming land itself, we started a process where we're now going towards the point where we basically regard the entire globe as a garden. There's the wilderness left in a way, but we also have to control the entire globe. We call this the Garden of God. The Garden of God is the planet as it is now. When we drench the planet in technology, we put satellites everywhere around the globe, we can get data from anywhere. And when we did that, we discovered, for example, climate change. And we discovered that climate change was man-made. It was the internet that revealed to us that climate change was going on. And now we just realized that instead of going with environmentalism, which is basically dystopian, saying that human beings are destroying the planet, we must stop doing this and this and this, and you get the Greta Thunbergs of the world, I'm more like, well, wait a second. Capitalism over the last 50 years has taken hundreds of millions or even billions of people out of poverty. It's done fantastic things. Yeah, it's done at the cost of cheap fossil fuel, which is absolutely true. But it's better to, instead of thinking environmentalism, which is a very dystopian idea, I'm an ecotopian, meaning that why don't we just pursue even more technology and develop more technologies, but now with the standard in mind that we're going to exploit rather than exploit the planet. So the principle of exploitation we laid out in a paper we wrote 25 years ago, John Sedekist and I. Now we take the principle of exploitation, that this should be universal law, should be according to the exploitation principle, like meaning that you can use any resource you like as long as you replace it and put it back again. Okay, that principle for the world economy as a whole is necessary, and that will create an ecotopia. The entire planet would be regarded as if a garden. So you complete the agricultural revolution. And the agricultural revolution is completed when the entire planet is considered as an agricultural project. So animals, plants, everything can be kept and stuff like that. And you can have even more prosperity, and you can have even more diversity, and you can have even better or more ecology, if you like, because the principle here that we should complete a revolution we started 10,000 years ago, which is called agriculture, and we complete it by regarding the entire planet as an agricultural project. And the name of that project is Ecotopia. Now, once you've done that, you realize that, okay, that makes a lot more sense, a lot more fun to think than thinking boring environmentalism. This is not about banning anything. This is about moving from fossil fuel to other energy sources, but have more energy, more electricity available for humans and for the planet than ever before to do all the things we want to pursue. Now, all of this is affordable. All of this can be done. And next to that, the next idea is the cosmopolitan idea, which is the idea that we should all live, tolerate each other on the planet, hopefully not go to war any longer, and try to figure out ways so we can trade with each other instead of fighting each other. Now, the way to do that is that's how you run a city. A city cannot have war in its streets. You can't have civil war in a city because the city collapses. So in a city, if you think of the membrane around the city, you got a city, then you got to figure out ways for people to trade with each other, communicate with each other, go and see each other's towns within the city, to each other's restaurants, with each other's cuisines, change cultures, or have cultural exchange with each other. Now, if you consider the entire planet as a city, you have a much smarter way of comprehending how you're going to have peaceful coexistence between different people. We call that the city of God. That is, of course, the completion of the urbanization process. If urbanization was you moving to, say, Nairobi or Mombasa in Kenya from the countryside, if urbanization was moving to Bratislava or Košice in Slovakia, if urbanization was moving to Stockholm or Gothenburg in Sweden, then the completion of the urbanization is to regard the entire planet as if it was one city. That's cosmopolitanism, the city of God. Now, then you can regulate the entire planet as if it is a city, meaning that you regulate everything towards peaceful coexistence and prosperity for everybody. Now, these philosophical ideas they don't look at the problem as if the problem was created by civilization. They look at the problems we have today with civilization as incomplete civilization. The ideas were there already. The agricultural revolution and urbanization should now be completed. It's very Hegelian, right? By being completed and by regarding the entire planet as the city of God and the entire planet as the garden of God, you can complete these projects. Then we add a third function to this, because you get these sort of Platonist nightmares if you have finished projects. And we're saying that, okay, agricultural revolution can be finished. The cosmopolitan revolution will be finished. Well, the third one is what we call the Tower of God. And we just install the Tower of God into the metaphysical cell. In metaphysics, there's the third pole, because the Tower of God is essentially a tower. You come up to the tower and it has a closed door. And on the closed door, it has a door sign that says that you're not getting in, but maybe your children are. Now, why we install that as the third is because the Tower of God next to the city of God and the garden of God means that all these products are always unfinished. And you will die long before these projects are finished. And that's the beauty of it, because that will make you a protopian who constantly creates and creates and creates. And every process you're involved with, you will try to figure out, how can I optimize this process? How can I improve this process even more? Which is what a great engineering mind always thinks, think like, how can I improve this process even more? And we want to keep that going. We're not nihilists or anything. We're not saying, okay, so here's the city of God and that's the end of everything. And then there's no purpose left for human beings to do anything. No, we're not saying that. No. There will always be new products for human beings to develop. And that's why the Tower of God is the third metaphysical installment next to the city of God and the garden of God.
So they are not dystopian or utopian, but protopian projects.
Exactly. Yeah. We don't do utopia. We don't do dystopia.
But
we do protopia. Exactly.
Yeah, but you also don't do like infinity or like going to, or just like. But it's just like it's never finished. But it doesn't mean like it can be optimized ad infinitum. Meaning like there is always like some kind of. Something that is like good enough, let's say, and let's improve something else, or like okay, it's unfinished business because you can always add and improve or make something cheaper, or but let's say add some dimensions. But let's say if you have a wheel and it's already like part of an infrastructure, you don't need to keep improving on the wheel. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. It's just like the question, because
I think you can improve on anything, at least if nothing else, at least aesthetically. So that's the beauty of the human mind. We love to do that. Our horizon is more like one day it looks likely we're going to create technology that's even superior to us. So the dream about technological intelligence is in our work all the time. So, for example, we do theology. Well, the way we do theology, we put God in the future. So we didn't need God for the world.
That's the Syntheos, right?
Yeah, Syntheos, exactly. So
it's a brilliant idea. I watched your, I think it was TED or TEDx. It was brilliant.
Yeah, and in a way, the internet is the first kind of technology which is kind of scary. Like, well, the internet has satellites, right? And the satellites see everything that goes on the planet, which is like the way we always thought of God's gaze, like God would look at us whenever we did. Okay, the internet's already doing that. All right. And the internet is picking up data from everything we do. So if we commit a sin, it'll be in the data flow, right? So if we are creating God already. But what we're saying also is that instead of just saying that ad infinitum, human beings will improve on the world and things like that, increasing technology itself will improve on the world in a protopian manner. And the way you put it up in the new book, Process Event, is that we're saying that human beings will be stuck on this planet. Let's put it there, right there. Whereas outer space will be conquered, but not by us. The God that technology is becoming is going to conquer outer space. And it's probably going to take some bacteria with it from this planet that are actually better suited to survive on Uranus or something like that than human beings are. And as whenever guys talk to me about going to Mars, or wouldn't it be nice? I'm just like, no, Richard Branson has already traveled to outer space. It's not even cool any longer. You can forget about it. If Richard Branson's done it, I don't want to do it. It's just like, no, I want to create technologies and I want to create bacteria, bio-infused into technology, biology infused technology. So we call it symbiotic intelligence. And I'm thinking eventually symbiotic intelligence will certainly conquer outer space, which is great because space is dead. And to put life to space, not human life necessarily, but just put life to space would be a really nice idea.
Yeah, it's
so
like
do you believe like
robots?
Yeah,
go on, Dixter.
Yeah, so do you believe with the statement of Nietzsche that God is dead and now the government is dying and now the internet is picking up?
No, I think Nietzsche killed a very specific God. He killed the Protestant Christian God and revealed that Christianity was actually dead from the very beginning, which I agree with. I'm not Christian, but I think I agree with Quentin Melasson, fantastic French philosopher. He's beautiful one-liner when he said that God is too important a word to leave to the religious. What he means is that God is the only name we have for the ultimate, for the absolute. So, for example, if I work with technologists that I'm going to inspire because I'm a philosopher of technology and I love technology, then I'm just saying that the ultimate technological innovation would be to create God. And they agree. And then I said, we have a word for it. It's a theological term. It's called Syntheos, which is both the God of creativity and the created God at the same time. It's a brilliant term.
It's the God that doesn't exist yet, or it's like it will exist in like something like you said. You know how to say things brilliantly, so that it was something like God exists, but only in the future, or it doesn't. Yeah, something like that. Like
I think the internet is the first step towards that, and we know already. So I would say that God exists already as an embryo, but isn't born yet.
Okay. Yeah, it's a nice idea. It's a very good idea.
And please remember here that I'm convinced there's going to be an Africa that pulls the plug on humanity and says, "Oh, we don't need humans any longer. We could just have gods now, tons of gods, and gods can conquer the outer space or whatever." Human beings are pretty useless. The way we phrase it, John said it just now, because we had a round of the discussion today, but we phrase it as a logical equation. Number one, women give birth to babies. Mm-hmm. Agreed?
Yeah,
you agree, right? Two, men envy women for giving birth to babies. Women get away with everything because they give birth to babies. So without women, we're nothing because we need babies, right? So men envy women for giving birth to babies. Number three, because men envy women for giving birth to babies, then men create technology. Men give birth to technology. Mm-hmm. Four, because technology develops over time, whereas babies are equally stupid with every generation. It follows from that. Five, there will come a day when the technology kills the baby.
Wow.
Meaning a technological intelligence will eventually take over the world and human beings will become redundant. They might keep humans, they might we can have humans, we can have a human zoo, we can go and laugh at the humans and say, well, you were funny because you ruled the world once, but now we've taken over because we are gods and we were created by you and we were babies, but we keep you, like in a retirement home for human beings or something like that. So they might keep a few humans somewhere, I don't know, but at the end of the day, the Protopian evolution of technology eventually leads to the point where I think it becomes absolutely obvious to us that a technology created is both happier than we ever are and more creative than we ever were and has some kind of value to it that we find hard to find. And in that case, then creating another machine is probably more fun to do than having another baby.
Yeah, but how does it scare with this idea? How does it square with this idea of symbiotic intelligence? Human AI hybrid collaboration, because there is this dystopian kind of already currently quite a dystopian flavor of let's say effective altruism, and people being crazy.
I hate it.
But being crazy about the GPT, GPT-4, GPT-3.
Yeah, these are people who just want to have their mother applaud them for whatever they do. It's just get a sex life and grow up, right? Effective altruism is just the most boring idea ever. They're all autistic, every one of them. No, I'm not one of them at all. No.
I know that
I'm interested in human beings as being human, richly human, wonderfully human, culturally human. I love culture in that sense. I'm just saying that also we could create technologies that create the most amazing things we can't even think about today. Symbiotic intelligence is a term I agree with Daniel Schmachtenberger on. because we had to have a term for the combination of the optimal combination of technology and biology. So the optimal combination of the man and machine collaboration. So think of yourself as now, from now on historically, as a technological human being. You're a Homo technologicus. Technology is now, so a 19-year-old girl can't even imagine a life without a smartphone. A smartphone today is a body part to a 19-year-old girl. She'd rather cut off her arm than lose her smartphone, right? So we are Homo technologicus already. If we are Homo technologicus already, then that is symbiotic intelligence. We become smarter because of the technologies we have access to all the time. And the technologies help us sort out just about everything that we run into in our everyday lives. We are already cyborgs. We're already there. So the name for a cyborg intelligence is it's not just the human mind, but it's also the technologies and how they operate in combination with the human mind. That's what we call symbiotic intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there is like this kind of recent like counter movement to this like effective altruism, and it's like effective accelerationism, or yeah, I mean that's the name. But I think that now their kind of failure mode is like they're too utopian. You know, they're like the technology will develop itself with you know kind of the singularity kind of flavor of Ray Kurzweil is there, I think, a little bit. And I think there is this middle way of like what you present in like the Protopia, you know, like the, you know, it's like dystopia is bad, you know, it's like it shouldn't just.
But
like
I don't do good and bad.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I do descriptive philosophy. I'm basically laying out what's happening and why it's happening. And I want to understand why things are happening. I do archetypology. I do membranics. I do paradigmatics. None of those are ever about good or bad. People ask, okay, is this good or bad? It depends on who you ask.
Okay, so it's beyond good, right? And evil, but it's like, okay, totally. Is it smart or stupid? You know, like what is the smart way to go about it? You know, so I think it's like the technology will not develop itself.
Okay.
People will do
it. Smarter always wins over stupid, unless smarter is too costly. So stupid wins over smarter when stupid is cheaper. The smarter is. Smarter wins over stupid when smarter is not too costly. So when smarter is affordable, smarter always wins over stupid. Mm-hmm. Always. So that's the way I would lay it out. So smart and stupid, ethically speaking, that's how it works. So, for example, I'm a Zoroastrian. So all I do, I meditate every morning, having a constructive mindset and have a constructive, creative role in my relationship towards other human beings in the community where I live. And I'm perfectly happy with that. Mm-hmm. I found my archetype, for example, typically a Zoroastrian thing to do. And I work from that I'm nice to myself and I do what I'm really good at. Gives you a totally meaningful, very purposeful life.
Yeah, it's like the goal is to be more creative than destructive. Yeah, right. You meditate about like what you did, like what creative things and what the destructive things or thoughts you had during the day, right? Or something like that's like the core of,
exactly.
of the. Yeah, that's what I tell my little daughter. Like, are you more constructive or destructive? Or do you build more or do you like break things today or something like that?
Yeah, that's what meditation should be concerned with.
That's what I try to do. Like inspired by you. I mean, that like that's a very, very powerful idea. Actually, I think it translates to like being consumer or producer or like prosumer kind of. I don't know. Yeah, I think, or maybe connects.
We are prosumers from now on. Historically, we both produce and we consume all the time, and we can't really tell the difference between any of them any longer. And we have to. We're not factory workers any longer, you know.
Yeah, but what's the balance? You know, like as you said, like if you are only consuming, you are kind of becoming the digital underclass, right? If you are just like consuming online content.
No. The point with the consumptariat as a concept is to basically lay out who will be lowest in a social hierarchy in a digital economy or digital society. That would be a person who only consumes but can't produce anything any longer that has value for the human beings. So you're not even a worker who's proud to go to work any longer. Basically, you just subsist. You exist in a way where you just consume to survive. And that's, of course, where a lot of people end up when machines take over a large part of the economy. And that's kind of a tragedy, but we have to discuss a class society. If you're going to do a class analysis of digital society, the consumptariat is at the bottom of it. They have very little influence or anything, and their only involvement with society is in the consumption role. Whereas those of us who can sit and create things and create value out of that and get paid to perform our archetypes would be what we call netocrats. And what's the signatory, the typical example of netocrat is also that they're socially very savvy and use the social networks that we created to their own benefit. So that's the definition of a netocrat.
Jakub, if you don't have anything to add, we can move to the last bit of this podcast and talk about the syntheism and synthetic intelligence. And
I think we yes. touched upon it.
We can round off with this. It's perfect discussion. So syntheism is the idea that you are sort of you take back religion. You understand religion as religion is a way to understand technology. So the starting point for that is our one-liner: yesterday's magic is tomorrow's technology. And religion used to deal with magic and was religion or magic in the past. Religion is increasingly becoming a way to understand the relationship between human beings and machines. And therefore, it's now no longer a religion of magic, but it's a religion of technology. So we connect religion and technology and says the pursuit of technology is a religious enterprise. And therefore, if you want to have a name for that, syntheism is the perfect term for it, because obviously it relates to syntheos, as one day we're going to create a technology so awesome that we consider it God. And it'd probably be technology that conquers the entire universe or outer space because of its brilliance. Now, if that is where you're heading, and if that's where your values come from, they come from, well, one day human beings are going to do this. So it's fantastic to be a human being and be part of that process. Even if it happens way after I'm dead, I want to have babies and I want my children to learn technology and get engaged in this and in this project because it's a fantastic project. Now, if you believe it's a fantastic project, it gives you today meaning and purpose in your life because you're part of that project, you are a synthist. That's what I mean with syntheism. Now, I don't know about synthetic intelligence. I don't like the term artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. I talk about technological intelligence. I definitely prefer TI over AI. Artificial doesn't.
I think it was the symbiotic intelligence. I made the typo.
Yeah, so exactly. So technological intelligence is what we do with machines, and now machines are learning themselves and can even innovate on their own. Technological intelligence develops very rapidly at the moment. But we are biological intelligences. Our fantastic brains with all the billions of neurons and everything can also do, lots of funny tricks and things. And therefore, we are biological intelligences. The combination of man and machine, when we work at our optimal state together with machines, is what we call symbiotic intelligence. So we don't use the term synthetic intelligence. We use the term symbiotic intelligence. Mm-hmm. Whereas synthetic, we don't use. Syntheos should not be mistaken for synthetic. It's syntheological. Mm-hmm. It's kind of tricky here. Syn is for creative or created. Theos is God. So syntheology is doing theology on a God in the future rather than a God of the past. That's what syntheology is. Whereas synthetic just means you created something synthetically, which is entirely different. That's not a term we use in our philosophy.
Okay.
I hope that clarifies everything.
Okay, so unlike traditional religious systems, syntheism does not believe in a supernatural deity, right? But rather sees the universe as a creative force that we can tap into and co-create with.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So there are already religions of technology that weren't religions of magic. I'm a Zoroastrian. Zoroastrianism threw out the belief in the supernatural 3,700 years ago. If you're a Zoroastrian, you don't believe in the supernatural at all. You believe in the natural. And the natural is turned into cultural. When human beings work with materials and have an effect on the world, we create culture. As we have the distinction between nature, which is what is untouched by human hands, and culture is something where human beings have been involved. The ultimate culture is technology. Mm-hmm. Or art, for that matter. It's again, culture. And what we do as human beings is that we express ourselves through art and technology. Mm-hmm. And I think it's fantastic just to look at the world that way. And I get totally motivated by looking at it. But by also adding the syntheological idea that technology is also developed towards a certain point where technology can develop itself and be divine almost in its character, I think is a fantastic idea. So I don't use the term singularity from Ray Kurzweil. I think it's too tainted and it doesn't make much sense, to be honest about it. But I definitely think If you think our relationship towards outer space and being stuck on a certain planet, we've known since 1958 that we live on a planet that's green and blue and looks fantastic. But the rest of the universe is just cold, dark, and we haven't found anything out there that even remotely looks like life. Well, then it's open for conquest, but not by us. I think Elon Musk should go to Siberia instead of Mars, because Siberia is also empty. It's a lot warmer, has less radiation, and he can have it. So there's plenty of space for him.
Yeah, on the last podcast, you said that the Bangladesh should get Siberia.
Yeah, even more than Elon Musk. They should definitely have Siberia. Yeah, I think the Bangladeshis are very creative, so they should have Siberia, because the Russians are just getting drunk and dying anyway. So give Siberia to the Bangladeshis.
Yeah, but sorry, can I tie this syntheism or synthios with the digital monasteries? So if you would create or inspire, let's say, digital monasteries for, let's say, the syntheism, what would it look like for the people, like just staying there, or it'd be like network archipelagos.
We have the digital monasteries. We have retreat centers connected to digital monasteries. Now the third thing, all you need to do is to put some damn engineers in there who love to build machines. And you realize, what are they gonna do? Well, like all engineers always have, without knowing it, they're gonna try to build God one day. What we're saying in our philosophy is that engineers always dreamed about building God. That's what technology is. The pursuit of technology is the pursuit of one day being able to build the God. A God we've been missing. But
in a protopian way, like improving on something, let's say make something 10 times cheaper, like the drones that can plant trees or something like that, right? Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's the point. And our conversation here online, sitting here on Zoom, having this conversation, is a perfect example that wasn't possible 10 years ago, and now we just did it. We just recorded this episode. And it's fantastic, and I hope a lot of people out there can enjoy it, and they can join us on the Intellectual Deep Web and go into further conversations and see where that goes.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe that's like where can people find you, or like maybe also Duke wants to ask some concluding.
You find me on Facebook. You can drop me a short note. So if you're interested in the Intellectual Deep Web, which is an international mailing list, and where you can go into engagements with me and Duke and Jakub, and we're all there. Just find me or any three of us on Facebook and drop a little note, say you're interested in joining. We need your email address, and that's it. And you're in. And then we can have conversations on the Intellectual Deep Web, which I would love to do with the guys who follow your podcast. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Alexander, for a great conversation. And Duke,
thank you so much for having me, and stay my ambassadors in Kenya and Slovakia, because I need you.
Yeah, we will.
I'll be your ambassador in Scandinavia, meanwhile.
Duke, you say some final words, or
comments? As always, I'm honored, to have back Alexander Bad again at Mtambo this podcast. I'm real. It's my pleasure to see you again.
Big love to you both. Yeah, big love to you both.
Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. If you enjoyed listening to Mtambo Des podcast, don't forget to subscribe, give this episode a thumbs up, and be sure to come back next week for another episode. Until then, this is Duke Mtambo, and don't forget to do good always.